Thank you, and welcome to everyone who's joined today's virtual roundtable to discuss the experience of small business community during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Rhett Buttle, and I'm the co-executive director of Small Business Roundtable and the founder of Public-Private Strategies. First, let me get an important piece of business out of the way. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And now that we have that settled, we can go back to the program. The Small Business Roundtable is a coalition of leading small business and entrepreneurship organizations that collectively advocates for the more than 30 million small businesses. We are dedicated to advancing policy and promoting inclusion to benefit the businesses who are at the heart of our American economy. We also want to give a huge thanks to many of the business organizations partners who've joined the Small Business Roundtable today for today's conversation and helping us promote the conversation. You should see them on today's slide. Our world is experiencing an unprecedented situation, and American small businesses are struggling to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. While trust in other institutions continues to ebb and flow, Americans see small business as one of the most important bedrocks of our society. To give you a sense of why, nearly 100 million people generate their livelihoods from them, and they represent more than 90% of all businesses in every state in our beautiful country. Just to give you a quick overview of our today's agenda, first, we are so thrilled to be able to hear from Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, to discuss recent and current efforts in Congress. After that, we'll hear from some small business owners who are going to share their stories with the speaker. We'll then hear from business organization leaders to ask some questions, and we'll have some open roundtable dialogue. As a reminder, this roundtable webinar is being recorded. You're welcome and encouraged to put your questions and comments into the chat box. With that, it is my great pleasure to turn the call over to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Brett. Thank you for the opportunity to visit and listen to so many of our friends in the small business community. I'm excited about that. I particularly want to acknowledge on Cinco de Mayo, Ramiro, who is on the phone from the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Ramiro Cavazos. Ramiro, I just want to tell you this. My daughter, it's her birthday today, Cinco de Mayo. And I bring that up in reference to small business because in San Francisco, where we live, it's almost impossible to have a party at any place because all the restaurants usually are all booked up for Cinco de Mayo. And that begins like the day after Easter and lasts until Memorial Day. So Cinco de Mayo has a long sweep in our community. And so sadly this year, we won't be having that experience, but hopefully we'll be back to that place. Because many of those restaurateurs and party spaces and all the rest, they had a dream. They had a dream about community, bringing people together, sharing their culture, their recipes, their whatever, but it only applies to restaurants, but other businesses. People have a dream, and they have the optimism and the risk-taking and the courage to act upon that dream. And to see it so threatened at this time is really a threat to the entrepreneurship of our country. Our founders were the ultimate and earliest of our entrepreneurs in our government, and now we have that American spirit. So it was really important when this horrible thing descended upon us that we try as hard as we could to rescue those who had been the vitality and the lifeblood of our economy, our small business owners, the producers of jobs, the creators of jobs and capital and wealth in our country. And again, a sense of community all the time. So I thank all of you for what you do, for being on this call, and want to share with you a few things. I'm so pleased that PPP was part of our initial proposal in CARES 1. It was bipartisan that we would do that. In the intervening bill, when there was immediately need for more, we thought it's not reaching everyone. It's not reaching some of their underbanked community, whether it's women, people of color, veterans, rural communities, Native Americans, the rest. We just weren't reaching everyone, so we wanted to have particular attention and set aside for that. But at the same time, we drastically increased the EIDL loans from $7 billion to, well, now it's over $300 billion that were leveraged to lend in that program, which was going out the door very fast, as well as increase the grants. We want to do more in the grants. That's as much as we could get, $10 billion more, but a great deal more for EIDL loans. as well as approving the $250 billion more for small business, in addition to the 60 for the set aside, the 60 for loans and grants. So we got it up, and then $100 billion for hospitals and testing. I do believe that the testing is going to be our entree to open the door. That's going to be the key to it all. And so we, in our next bill, will be focusing on so much of that. Now, let me give credit to Maxine Waters, chair of the banking, now called the Financial Services Committee, but our godmother of it all, Nydia Velasquez. The two of them work together on how the bank combination with small business and rest, and not only banks, but community development financial institutions who could be lending more, and we have to do more in that regard. There's some of the things that we have cooking up. We want to extend the period of when you have to pay back. We want to lower the number, we want to set aside for small businesses of under 25 people. Nydia Velasquez has put her project together, and will go forward with that in the next couple of days. So listening to you at this time is very important, because they're important decisions that we have to make in terms of funding, but also in how the legislation is written. We were very pleased that it was accepted. It was rejected at first, but then accepted by the other side. So we're going to be, again, strengthening PPP, expanding support beyond the PPP as it has been originally presented, and then having more resources, because as you know, you can help people with their rent, with their utilities, with their paycheck, with that. But if they don't have customers coming in the door, we're not where we need to be. So we will have a major commitment to state and local to ensure that people who are risking their lives to save lives are not losing their jobs, or that can be retained in their jobs. Some have been fired already, but we want them back. And then other initiatives, whether it's direct payments or unemployment insurance, whatever it is, so that people have some money to spend. But all of that will only come really to life when we do the testing to open the door, to unlock the lockdown. So any suggestions that you have about small business in particular, when I talk to my small business community, which is thriving in California and San Francisco, John Arismeyer knows it, they tell me they want three things. They want access to capital, they want a trained workforce, and they want customers. So we'll try all we can to do all three, but the customer part depends on the vitality of the entire economy. So with that, with my appreciation for all of you who are here, I look forward to hearing from Ramiro and Jan and Jillian and John and others in the conversation. I'm glad Jan is here because it's really important. Jill Houghton, CEO of the Chamber for Disabilities, and I welcome every one of you who's on the call, the many thousands, the few that I've had a chance to chat with before this general conversation, and thank you all for your leadership, for your optimism. I say, you've heard me say so many times, I don't think there's anything more optimistic a person can do than to start a small business, except maybe get married. But probably you have weighed that carefully, both of those decisions carefully. But again, we want to salute that courage and try to get through this as soon as possible. Your direct input is essential. Know your power on this, because it's no use us writing bills whose ramifications do not help you where you are on the front line. So thank you for your availability today, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Brett, for your leadership in bringing us together.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. We're now going to hear from three small business owners. Our first speaker is Shondell Newsom. He is so awesome. He runs a marketing firm in Las Vegas. He's also the chair of the Urban Chamber of Commerce in Las Vegas. So Shondell, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rhett, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for holding this roundtable. My name is Shondell Newsom, and as Rhett mentioned, I'm a small business owner and also the chairman of the board of directors for the Urban Chamber of Commerce in Nevada, representing small and diverse companies throughout the Silver State. There are 270,000 small businesses representing 99% of all businesses in Nevada. Yes, we are more than gaming and hospitality. There are 270,000 small businesses. We employ 487,000 people, nearly 100,000 of whom work for minority-owned businesses. Yet Nevada had just 8,600 PPP loans approved in the first round. My personal story is similar to many firms, moms and pops, or what we call mainstream small businesses. During the first round of PPP, as you mentioned, we learned a hard lesson that not all small businesses are created equal. My family-owned business started in 2006. It is now in its third generation and a recipient of the SBA Nevada Family-Owned Business of the Year. We are veteran-owned, minority-owned, and woman-owned, with my daughter succeeding me as primary owner. We are a marketing firm with typically 10 to 15 employees at any given time. As a representative of the chamber, I heard that many small businesses were not funded because they did not have strong banking relationships and were not prepared. But we were not funded by the PPP in the first round, even though we were prepared. For more than a decade, we have had an outstanding relationship with our small business banker. We keep our financials solid, and as a military family, we are prepared for a disaster, even though this one is unprecedented. We eventually got funded during the second round after Nevada leaders and yourself as a great leader in the House and the Senate fought for smaller firms. This process exposed yet again the disparity in access to capital that has been an issue since I started my firm 14 years ago. The SBA and our legislators need to make a priority to improve access to capital for small businesses, focusing on very small and minority-owned firms in particular. Next, I'll pass it along to my colleague, Frank Knapp, to speak.
Thank you, Shondell, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for holding this roundtable. My name is Frank Knapp. I am a small business owner, and I also am the president and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce, which I co-founded in the year 2000. In the first round of the PPP, pardon me?
That's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. The year 2000 being founded just simply means I'm old, but that's okay. In the first round of PPP loans, only 23,000 of the more than 400,000 small businesses in my state received loans. Let me describe my personal story as an example of how these loans were not very first come, first served, as the SBA regulations required. My family is a small dog kennel, and in March, all the boarding business stopped, and most employees were laid off. We notified our commercial bank of 20 years that we wanted to apply for a loan. But the day before the loan process started, the bank recommended that we apply to an online lender. Neither the online lender nor another bank that we tried helped us. 2 weeks later, our bank told us that they were now ready to process loans, but we found out that they had already been successfully processing loans for other customers. We did get the loan last week, a month after we first tried. The bottom line is that the success of small businesses receiving a loan to survive should not have depended on the bank they used or if the bank wanted to make the loan. The process simply wasn't fair. My colleague Ann Zimmerman is up next.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you today, Madam Speaker. I am Ann Zimmerman, a CPA from Cincinnati, Ohio. I employ 6 people, and I'm completely buried in the details of these recent relief acts. I am also the co-chair of Businesses for Responsible Tax Reform, a small business advocacy group that formed in response to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. We work for fairness for truly small businesses in the areas of tax and economic security. The country will not recover from the current economic crisis if our small businesses do not survive to lead the way back to economic prosperity. We need Congress to help the truly small businesses that will continue to struggle despite the PPP loans. To that end, I ask you to consider a few things in the next relief package. First, I recommend no strings attached grants to truly small businesses. This will allow us to stay open and operational so we can make it to the other side of this crisis and employ as many or more than we did before this all started. Second, I ask that Congress legislate to overrule IRS Notice 2020-32, which in essence made the PPP loans taxable against the original will of Congress. I have written a paper about this and will present it to you through the organizers of the meeting. Next, I ask that Congress expand the 8-week period of forgiveness of PPP loans to 2.5 months, the same period considered for establishing loan size. Absent this change, many small businesses will be stuck with a loan balance they must repay, regardless of whether they retain their entire staff. This discrepancy in the 2 time periods also hurts all self-employed workers. It is currently not possible for them to have their full original loan amounts forgiven if they are a one-person shop without meaningful rent expense. And finally, I ask you to continue your good work to lower prescription drug costs. My daughter and granddaughter have type 1 diabetes, and another daughter has rheumatoid arthritis. They rely on prescription drugs to just stay alive and out of a wheelchair, but their medication can cost thousands of dollars even with their insurance. No one should ever have to choose between staying alive and bankruptcy. Thank you again for hearing me.
Thank you, Ann, very much.
We will now move to question and answer, Speaker Pelosi, before we open up the roundtable. It's my pleasure to introduce Ramiro Cavazos, who's the president of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Ramiro?
Madam Speaker, thank you again for your time today and your great leadership. On behalf of our board of directors and our chairwoman, Carmen Castillo, and our chair-elect Alice Rodriguez, we want to thank you and Maxine Waters and Nidia Velasquez for your strong leadership. As you know, Latinos form 60 million residents in the United States. We're 1 out of every 6 Americans, and we employ thousands of Americans, and we have close to 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses out of the 30 million small businesses in America. Many of them are struggling, as you know, and many of them have been, as these stories that you've heard, trying to get their PPP loan. I want to share with you that we'd like to make sure that these firms not only have the liquidity that they need, but also get a better share of procurement from the United States government. After all, they're taxpayers. And I just want to make these opportunities, as you do, more accessible to our minority-owned small businesses. Wanted to just ask you that question and see, as we move forward, there's an opportunity through this crisis to come out with a positive outcome for our small minority and women-owned businesses. How could we make them better vendors for the U.S. government and get a fair share of their tax dollars back as vendors for the goods and services America buys?
Well, thank you, Ramiro, for your question and for your figures. 1 in 6 people in America, or 1 in 5 Hispanic American, and 5 million of the 30 million small businesses. That's a big chunk. And by the end of this week, we probably would have done loans to maybe 3 million, like 10% of that. So it's a long way to go. So we've tried to say to businesses, if this is not necessary to the survival of your company, you shouldn't be asking for the loan. Leave it be there for somebody for whom it is essential. And that is a criterion of it, so that more people can have access. But thank you for the pride you take in your beautiful community and the strength that brings to America. What we want to do on procurement is to expand the access, the amount of access. And so that would be one thing, that a higher percentage, which something we can talk about, but we also have to set standards that are achievable. That is to say, when we set bonding requirements that are almost impossible to achieve, we're giving an advantage to somebody else. And that's, you know, when you give an advantage to somebody else, you're not next in line, shall we say. So I'd be interested in any feedback that you would like to give in terms of bureaucratic obstacles too, because people see it differently regionally or even type of business that they're in. But I've been on the Intelligence Committee forever and also on the Banking Committee long ago, and I've seen the challenges that small businesses face when they try to engage in procurement because of some, maybe it's a standard business procedure if you're a great big company and have all these lawyers and all this bonding and all the rest. But for those breaking through, it just is an unfair disadvantage and really, frankly, not necessary. We do, though, believe that we have to expand the percentage that is.
Wonderful. Thank you, Speaker. We're now going to hear from Xiling Tong, who's the president of the National Asian Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. Xiling, over to you. Xiling, are you with us? All right, we will go to Jen Earl, who's the CEO of the National Association of Women Business Owners. Jen?
Thanks so much, Rhett. And thank you so much for everybody for pulling this together and for being on the line today. We're so grateful. So NABO was founded in 1975 and represents the voice of the 10 million women business owners here in the United States, the fastest growing segment of the US economy. And my question for you today, Madam Speaker, you have been an advocate for women and minority-owned businesses throughout your tenure. As you know, the federal government maintains a procurement scorecard, such as a 5% prime contracting goal set aside for women-owned businesses. Do you believe there should be a set-aside within the PPP and the EIDL that mirrors the procurement scorecard to ensure women and minority-owned businesses have access to these crucial programs since money is drying up so quickly?
But you know, it is interesting because when we were establishing these criteria, the legislation to enable community development financial institutions and all the rest, the inference to be drawn from that was that they would be lending more to this. And so when I've spoken to both the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and the Secretary of Treasury, I'm saying, well, how come you're not making loans to the? He said, well, we're really not. That's not it's not required. We can't really do that. We can get the money to the institutions, which in turn will do that. So what we'd like to see is if we couldn't do something in the next bill that went beyond just saying that the set aside was for the lenders in these communities who know the businesses, they know the neighborhood, they know the personalities, they know the culture, and that's an easier connection for making a loan. But in fact, that we do have some requirement if the law will allow us to do that, and if we're writing the law, we think we should be able to do that. We had to convince everybody, you know, the House, the Senate, and the White House that would be a good idea. But when I've challenged on why are these businesses not getting this, is well, that was not what the law required us to do, and we would be overstepping our jurisdiction. So we want to try to write that here. Also, I think I mentioned earlier, we want to have for 25 below, so that there's if we could make that as a part of the criteria, then that would be a way to channel more of the money to smaller businesses. But as you know, and as others have indicated, some of these businesses are even much smaller than 25 employees, but at least we get into that category. I'd like to make it 10, frankly, but I think it probably will survive the process at 25. 25 and below. But yeah, let's, you know, we're going to see if we can't do that. It's a funny world that we live in. But you're used to being entrepreneurs. Sometimes people here are not as entrepreneurial, and they're really decided they are agents of the status quo, and that's the way it is. And so we're saying, well, no, that's not the way it needs to be. So let's, again, we have this opportunity. It's always important to know your power, make your voice known to your members of Congress, wherever they are, Democratic, Republican, to say we need more specific direction, because the spirit, intention, and all the rest is interesting. The way it's written and required, what we need, and that will require some, shall we say, outside mobilization. We can only do so much inside maneuvering under the circumstances we are now, if you know what I mean. But the outside mobilization will make a tremendous difference. And this has not been a partisan issue at all. Small business, we're all united in that. We like to say we planted a flag in the early, right around the time Frank was establishing the chamber in South Carolina. We were planting a flag here when I first came into leadership for our small businesses, for our country, to say this is a mountain, a hill, or whatever, a monument, an obstacle, something that we have to climb, and we have to get it right because you are working so hard, have such dreams, put so much of yourselves into it all. The least we can do is have the legislation that matches your courage.
So great. Thank you, Speaker. And I think we have Shiling back, who's the president of the National Asian Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. Shiling, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you very much. Dear Madam Speaker, thank you so much for your time with small business owners and also diverse chambers. National ACE represents 2 million Asian American and Pacific Islander owned business in the United States. May is our Asian Heritage Month, and we really appreciate your Asian Heritage Month proclamation to highlight accomplishments of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander, and also address the issue of anti-Asian violence. And our community really applaud your efforts. And I have 2 questions. Many Asian American and Pacific Islander business have been shut down after COVID-19, especially Asian restaurants. As of April 15, 60% of Chinese restaurants across America have ceased all operations. And we know you always very, care about especially Chinatown in San Francisco. While some areas of the country begin to reopen, restaurants are only allowed limited dining capacity. It is therefore not feasible for restaurants to rehire staff at a pre-COVID-19 levels and have their PPP loans forgiven. So as Anne mentioned, we really wish we can extend forgiveness rules from 8 weeks, for a longer period of time. And also, we would like to know what more can be done specifically for restaurants through the recovery period. My second question is in language service. We really appreciate Congresswoman Judy Chu and Grace Min. They have been advocates for our community during this crisis. And we thankful that the CARES Act include $25 million for SBA to provide resources and the service to small business concerns in the 10 most commonly spoken language other than English, which should include Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, and Korean. Almost 1/3 of Asian American Pacific Islander are limited English proficiency. With the most of the PPP and idle money probably will be already gone, when will this in language service and resources be provided? Again, Madam Speaker, we really appreciate your engagement with us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your questions here, and I do share, Chilling, I do share your admiration for Judy Chu and Grace Meng. They are relentless, persistent, dissatisfied advocates, as an advocate should be, until we reach our goals. In terms of the $25 million, we had that in our House bill, and it survived into the Senate bill, but they didn't fund it. So that's something with for sure. The language $25 million we will have in the next bill. In terms of the, I'm very proud of our Chinatown. We have, we're like a model to the country, how safe it has been there. I was criticized for visiting to show my support, and I'm so proud, as I knew I would be, that it has been a model for the country on how to proceed safely. And I want to get back also to something that was said earlier by Shondell. Shondell, I know we were excited about making the change that we did for casinos and the rest. I know you said there are things other than casinos in Nevada. However, there are lots of businesses that thrive off of them, and some of them are restaurants too. I take pride in the fact that Nydia was so instrumental in getting, and oh my God, Steve Horsford and Dina Titus and Susie Lee. They never. I'm sure the Republicans must have been acting too, but they were on my case morning, noon, and night until that could be changed. And I hope it has made a difference from what you can see there. But again, the hospitality industry, whether you're peripheral to it or centrally engaged in it, is taking a big hit. I certainly think we have to extend the loan forgiveness period, and that our chairwoman is already has written that language to do so, if that's helpful. We also wanted to be sure that restaurants are the center of communities for so many of our cultures and the rest. And as you said, because of spacing and the rest, harder to come back than maybe a retail shop. So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure people could go out. That's why we have the state and local, almost, hundreds of billions of dollars to keep people working at the state and local level. Direct payments and unemployment insurance. Not that people are going to be able to afford to go out as much as they used to. But as I said before, you can pay the rent and pay the wages and pay the utilities, but if you ain't got customers coming in the door, you're still not where you need to be. So we do have to extend that period, but also enlivening the rest of the community so that they have confidence to spend money. And that means we just have to come back. And as I said at the beginning, the path to coming back is testing, so that we have a clear, accurate view of how this has affected all of the communities in our country, so that early on we can save their lives instead of just documenting the disparity in deaths in our country. But the key to the economy is the science, is the good health of it all. So I hope that as people come forward, they will do so, and as businesses receive them, they will do so in a way that doesn't contribute to prolonging the pandemic, but nonetheless giving us a path to opening up. Yes, congratulations on National Heritage Month. We're celebrating Cinco de Mayo, the beautiful diversity of America in so many ways, and just the beautiful diversity of your businesses that are represented here. And I thank you for all of that. Again, any other suggestions you have? We will prolong the period. We're going to reduce the number of employees who qualify. We're going to try to write it in the law to the extent that we are allowed to specifically task those with the ability to make decisions about loans to be required to have that happen, and to do so in a way that builds up our financial institutions in those communities as well. We cannot allow the hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spent by the federal government to take us back from this situation to be a time when that money is spent to harden the disparity of access to capital, but instead to loosen it. And as we examine it, to go to Ramiro's question about how we can, again, recognize that a lot of the big money is in the defense industry and other areas of the government, and how do we have everybody participate to the fullest in those opportunities in our country. So let's stay in close touch, because we may think that we passed a law that's doing the job, but you may see that we are not. And I think that I know that Rhett is always letting us know about these things, and so is John Ahrensmeyer, and understand we're going to hear from him next.
Yes, and so Speaker Pelosi, now we're going to open up the roundtable. We're going to ask all of our leaders to hop in. We're doing this virtually, so we have a little bit of a queue. We're going to hear from John from SBM. We also have Ron from the Black Chamber and Justin from the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber, and then I think Amanda Ballantine from Main Street Alliance. But John from Small Business Majority, can I ask you to kick off our roundtable, please?
Thanks, Rhett. And Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to all the other panelists and to all the small business owners on the call. We've had the pleasure of working with Speaker Pelosi for at least the last 12 years, dating back to working together to get the Affordable Care Act passed, and we really appreciate her leadership and particularly her understanding of the importance of small business in our society and our economy, and your continued focus on small business, Madam Speaker, as we deal with this terrible crisis. So much appreciated. So I'm going to try to just set the stage here for the conversation. I may talk a little fast because I want to cover a number of things that I think then others can maybe get into more detail on. You know, we want to look forward here. We don't want to look back, but I want to give kind of a quick snapshot of where we're at. I mean, obviously, as all of you know, and has already been said on the call, it's absolutely heartbreaking to see what's going on in the small business community out there. People who work their lives to pursue their passion and who love their employees and their customers and what they do. This has just been a terrible blow. We've done some research recently that showed that 90% of small businesses have felt some impact from the crisis, and over half are either closing or about to close. So it's really a pretty dire situation. Everybody knows, you know, both the benefits and the shortcomings of the PPP and the EIDL programs to date. So I won't, you know, get into those. We've had some somewhat hopeful numbers come out in the last 24 hours showing that loans are at least going to, the average loan is smaller and it's likely going to smaller institutions. So we thank Congress for putting in some provisions to push that, and the SBA for making that more of a focus than it was the first time around. However, we need data, and we appreciate the fact that there's been a proposal made today by a number of senators, Schumer, Cardin, and others, to get some of that data quickly. We need demographic data, especially the racial component of business ownership, who's getting the loans, types of businesses, industries. As we just heard from Ling, restaurants are being hit, you know, maybe more than any other sector of the economy. We need to know how many of them are getting the money. Locations or rural businesses getting them, as well as other places. And is the money flowing just through banks, even through smaller community banks, or is some of it going through CDFIs and minority development institutions and other mission-driven lenders? So this is information that we need to do an even more in-depth assessment of the success of the program right now. So I'm going to focus on two things of where we go forward. One is the you know, immediate needs, and then one is just to touch on things we have to think about as we start to head toward a recovery phase. We firmly believe we're still in the emergency phase, but we need to be thinking in parallel tracks here. So on the immediate level, as the speaker mentioned, we still need a lot more money. Even if 3 million loans have been made, there are 30 million small businesses in the country, and many more than 3 million are affected. So we need a lot more going out there, and we need to make sure that that money is going to the very smallest businesses. We need to understand, you know, we need to focus on making sure that the funding is going to underserved communities. And again, it'll be interesting to see the data coming off the second part of this program. We need to see how much of it is going to underbank people. Even if the money is going through very small community banks, that's great. But there's still a lot of small businesses don't have commercial banking relationships with any bank. And that's where CDFIs and NDIs and others come in. So we want to make sure we're focusing on those. We definitely want to make sure more money is getting to the self-employed. They were pretty much entirely frozen out in the first phase of PPP. There are a number of other issues we need to focus on. We need to focus on the fact that businesses need money for not just payroll, but for other operating expenses. In some cases, the fact that PPP requires that the money be a percentage of payroll is creating a problem, especially for businesses that had to lay people off. And then there's the fear of businesses are fearful to take the money. Some have been approved, some have gotten the money and haven't spent it because they're really worried that it may not be forgiven, They're worried that, the money only goes for 8 weeks, and yet unemployment goes for 4 months. So many employees are saying they don't want to come back for that reason. So these are all issues that need to be addressed in the next phase of the bailout here. We, as Ann mentioned, we've been a big proponent of no strings attached grants, which will eliminate a lot of the inequality that has we've seen in the PPP program. There are a variety of different bills out there. Senator Harris and Representative Presley have bills focused on very smallest businesses. Senators Wyden and Cardin and Representative Dean and Kilmer have bills focusing on small businesses slightly larger size. And we need there are also proposals for broader grants not tied to size. Senator Warner and others in the Senate and Representative Jayapal in the House. And then actually a Republican, Senator Hawley in the Senate, has a goal along those lines. So we need to focus on other measures as well. Senator Cardin and Representative Maxine Waters have similar bills that would really address some of the immediate needs, much better reporting under the PPP, much better outreach to underserved communities, suspending all business loan payments, not just SBA loans, prohibiting debt collection and garnishment in this period. And there's a whole host of provisions in their legislation. So these are things we need to focus on in the immediate. And I'll quickly just say, as we're looking toward the future and the recovery period, what we've seen with this crisis is it's highlighted.
You, John, so if you could wrap up in 30 seconds and pass it to Ron, really appreciate it.
This has highlighted the incredibly important role of small business in our economy. And it's also highlighted the inequality in our economy faced by small business, particularly those in underserved areas. So we start to look at moving forward. We've got to look at that. We've got to look at infrastructure. And I know Ramiro focused on procurement. That's really important, particularly targeted to small businesses. And we've got to look at our healthcare system going forward as it relates to small business. There's been tremendous benefit with the ACA, with the marketplaces being available to small business, but we need to even do more, and then paid and sick leave. So happy to get into more detail on these if we have time.
Thanks, John. And why don't we hear from, maybe let's hear from Ron and Justin, and maybe the speaker if you'd like to share once we've heard from those. So Ron, over to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Speaker Pelosi, as well as the leaders, Shondell, who's one of our members, chambers. On behalf of the 145 Black chambers around the country, we say thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity to speak. We got really 3 quick points. One of them have already been mentioned, and that is data. From the Black business community and from our community at large, we're getting hit twice as hard on both fronts, both from our health as well as our wealth. We anticipate losing between 35 and 40% of all Black businesses due to this virus, because we're in 4 specific industries that are being hit the hardest. But yet we can still not gather the data that is detailed enough to determine who's getting the funding, where are they located, what industries are they in, what is their nationality, and what is the size of their business. We'd like to see more data be able to be provided so that we can have more accountability. Secondly, I heard the speaker speak a lot about government contracts. We look at that from 2 different vantage points. One, many of our Black firms have grown because of their opportunity to do business with the government, but the government is a bad client. The government pays, in some cases, up to 120 days. During the previous administration, we implemented the prompt pay. We'd like to see that come back in of a net 15 days payment schedule. And if it can be done in the government, then the private sector in many cases will follow suit. And then third, we appreciate what Treasury as well as Congress has done in reference to the larger 50 companies that took up $250 billion of the first funds. But we want to know who the other companies are that have not returned those dollars. We'd like to see some accountability on their perspective. We've seen that there's some good corporate citizens, but there's still very many of them that are out there. And when those dollars are being returned, we want those dollars to be set aside towards CDFIs that makes sure those dollars go back to the businesses that we own and operate. And the U.S. Black Chamber has a CDFI, so I'll raise my hand and say we'll take responsibility for the dollars getting back to the Black community. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Ron. Justin, over to you.
Thanks, Fred, and thank you, Madam Speaker. This is Justin Nelson with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, NGLCC. Thanks for your support of our organization and our community businesses. We represent the interests of about 1.4 million LGBT-owned companies in the U.S. I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I am going to take maybe just a little bit of a different tact here. As you might recall, just a few weeks ago, NGLCC, the U.S. Black Chamber, U.S. Hispanic Chamber, and ACE, and over 100 of our collective affiliates sent a letter to you and the other Big Four asking about C6 inclusion in the relief efforts and understanding that that it did have legs. I was just kind of curious to know what happened with that, making it across the finish line. I know there was concerns over funds being used on lobbyists, where most of our C6 organizations, especially those on this call, do not employ full-time lobbyists or have very few, if any, full-time lobbyists. And it's very difficult for organizations that are advocating on behalf of small businesses. And I think a lot of our state and local chambers of commerce that are advocating in their communities to find ways to keep their businesses alive if they're struggling to be able to keep their doors open. So I hope in the next effort there is consideration given to inclusion of C6 organizations. And I think we're all in agreement that we can do a carve out for any funding benefiting any paid lobbyists. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Madam Speaker, we have about 3 more people in the queue, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond if you wanted to do so.
Right. I'll briefly, and then want to hear the rest. But let me just say, in terms of Justin, we'd like to expand it. I don't know where this came from. 501c3, not 4, not 6, and the rest. It doesn't seem like fair. It doesn't seem fair at all. And one of the things we did also was to say to the Fed, as well as what we will do in the legislation, that we will expand to nonprofits who are so active in the communities as well. That they can participate in all of this, and some of those are advocates for LGBTQ, for Hispanic community, for helping some of our, shall we say, mixed families, Black community, Asian Pacific American community. You have many nonprofits in your communities who want to participate as well. So many of the things that you've said are things like I wait every day to hear what the Secretary of the Treasury is going to report to me, and I, quite frankly, am hopeful, but I don't have any guarantee that I can say I think some of these things went well. We did have many more people, billions of dollars spent in the communities, but there should have been so much more in my view, but I'll see when it gives me the information. Chuck Schumer, as was mentioned earlier, Chuck Schumer and Ben Cardin have just sent a letter from the Senate side saying we want more documentation of how this all went so we can make a judgment as we go forward. In terms of what Ron was saying about the some of the money that went out to some firms, there were 2,600, stop me if I said this already, 26,000 loans that went out, 26,000 loans went out to firms for $2 million or above. So we want to know, well, who are these firms? Could they legitimately say that the loan that they requested, the amount of the loan that they requested was essential to the survival of their company? Because that is the criterion. You're not supposed to just compete with firms who need it desperately if you don't really need it much. Or you can just ask for the part that you need, but not everything that you can put on a balance sheet that is maybe essential and maybe not. So we want to have some scrutiny as to what that is. And I think when people know that there will be scrutiny, there'll be less inclination to to abuse the system in that way, because it's competition for the dollar. It's not an unlimited resource. And I don't know how we ever cover 30 million businesses, but we don't cover it by people who don't need it asking for it to the tune of $2 million and above. John mentioned a whole slew of things in there, and again, the 25% for us in San Francisco, for them to say you can't pay more than 25% for your lodge, or the rest of it has to be for payroll. Well, you really can't even have a business if that's what you're going to be limited to for your rent. So I don't know why we even have that in there. I guess to make sure people are spending it on employees, but we want to help the business. We don't want to complicate matters, and so many of the things John mentioned. But I want to bring up one point, and that is this. John mentioned some of the bills that are out there, and he referenced what Congresswoman Jayapal and Senator Warner are doing as some ideas. They are not PPP. What they are proposing is an excellent idea, but is something different. And what that is a guaranteed paycheck. One of them has it at $90,000, the other at $100,000. A certain percentage of that paycheck would be guaranteed by the federal government to go out to the employees by way of the IRS or some other payroll entity. So it's minimal bureaucracy, just no judgment made. They're on the payroll, they get the paycheck, and again, that's a negotiation. What is the percentage of the $90,000 or $100,000 that would be there? Now that is efficient. It takes the pressure out of competing for money and uncertainty about it and the rest. I think it's very worthy of consideration. I don't mean to minimize how important the PPP is, because we all take pride in its creation. But when John mentioned it in this context of this conversation, I thought, well, if you're thinking of that in this category, we have other things called the job retention tax credit that the Ways and Means Committee is advocating for, and that is almost a path to Jayapal Warner too. So you all have to think about: are you better served by having your payroll guaranteed up to that amount of money? I don't know how many people are making more than that. I hope some are. But what I'm saying is, only to that point would it be part of this program as another way to help small businesses? Or do you think it's competitive with the PPP? Because that doesn't have any limit. In other words, we kept coming back to the drawing board and saying, we need money because this week we're going to run out of money again, they say, and then we have to get more money, and then how are we going to get up to 30 million? Well, easily, if we were to take a different route. Nobody could foresee how long this would be, I guess. I mean, we could see it had ramifications, and we don't know how long it'll be. But we do know that we want to spend whatever money we have in the fairest possible way, so that everybody can do it.
I think I promised your team I would get you off at 5 because I knew you have somewhere to be. I wanted to give you an opportunity to do some closing remarks and just real quickly maybe hear from the 3 people we had in the queue. So Amanda.
Okay.
Amanda, Todd, and Keith, 1 minute each, and then we'll have the speaker respond and give her closing remarks. So Amanda.
Thanks, Rhett, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for taking the time with us today. I want to thank all the panelists and especially Rhett for putting this event together. It's great to hear your thoughts and ideas going forward, Speaker Pelosi. Main Street Alliance is a national network of 30,000 small business owners around the country. And for our membership, COVID-19 has created an extinction level event. People are on the verge of bankruptcy. They're in very, very desperate straits, and they are working very hard to figure out whether the relief packages that exist can help them in the positions that they're in right now. I'm so glad that you discussed Representative Jayapal's bill and the Sanders bill. Main Street Alliance has been strong advocates of that type of approach. We agree it's very different than the PPP, but we think it's a long-term and efficient solution that would avoid a lot of the disparities we've seen with the with the grants and loans rolling out through the private lending system. So I want to really thank you for addressing that approach, and also just highlight a few changes that we know the PPP needs if it's going to be fixed in the short term, understanding that we also do need a longer term approach that can, cognize the amount of time that this crisis might take. The first one is clarifying what constitutes economic harm and articulating clear forgiveness terms to give certainty to business owners. Adjusting the program timeline to create flexibility around a longer recovery time. Percentage of the loan for non-payroll fixed costs must be expanded beyond 25%, especially in cities. And we also believe that as we pivot towards recovery, there needs to be more money included in any loan or grant package for owners to spend on capital costs to adapt to a longer recovery and allow them to pivot their business model to function to the extent that they're allowed to or able to right now. Of course, we need real-time data collection and reporting so we can ensure that the money is being distributed evenly. And once again, would really, really strongly recommend adoption of a longer-term subsidy program to support small businesses. Thank you.
Great. Todd, really, really quick, please.
Yeah, this is Todd.
Completely.
Todd McCracken, I'm the president of the National Small Business Association. I'd like to kind of just build a little bit on what Amanda said. I agree with most of that. And I do think we've given a lot of attention to the PPP and sort of the short-term programs, and that's super important. It's helped a lot of businesses and was really necessary. But we do have to, I hope, sooner than later, think about what the strategies are going to be as the economy does begin to turn and we can begin to get back to business again. Because a lot of companies are going to have to retool, rethink the way they do business, look for new opportunities, and that's going to require capital and lending and resources that may not be existing through traditional programs. So we really have to think about how we're going to help those companies grow. And we can only spread so much money across everyone. We've got to really think about growing the whole economy, and that's going to help everyone. So that's just the pieces I think are can't be overlooked in this. But nevertheless, in the short term, we do have to make sure that small businesses get from here to there, or else that economic rising tide will be too far away. But Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the time and attention, and we'll move forward together.
And we're going to stay on Pelosi and take questions from the over 2,000 small business owners who are on, but I just wanted to offer you the opportunity to make closing comments.
You said you had 3. I thought you had 3. I thought there were 3 more in terms of the questions, but you know what? I would love to hear from Ms. Hill, hear about our disability owners, our business owners in the disability community. Is she available to say something for us?
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for you've been such a champion for people with disabilities. We're 1 in 4 Americans, 50% more likely to be self-employed, and on top of it, we employ 6 to 7% more likely to employ people with disabilities. So I would just echo everything that's been said today, and just thank you for always being a champion and including people with disabilities in this discussion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that very much. And thank you for what you do. Thank you all. You have raised some questions that I think you'll be pleased with what you'll see in the legislation, whether it's the 25% or the 25 employees or the length of time, all of those kinds of things, the 501c3, 4, whatever. But if you have some idea, if you think that the Jayapal Warner is what we kind of refer to here, idea is a good one, speak up about that and let us know, because you can see a path from 3 million to 30 million is a long road, and this other paycheck guarantee might be a faster route for us to go. This is and I'm going to get off this call and get right on with the leadership and tell them what I've heard in this call, Know your power. You have tremendous power. There's so many of you. You're respected in your communities, the beautiful diversity that you represent. Make sure your members of Congress hear individually what that is, because I can do so much maneuvering internally, but the outside mobilization is what really brings it alive as we establish priorities. So I thank you for this opportunity to be invigorated by your thinking, by your courage, by your optimism. And Rhett, thank you again for your leadership in so many ways. And thank all of our those who spoke and those who listened. But I look forward to hearing to any and all of you with your ideas. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rhett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Stay safe. Stay safe.
And an hour of your time is so valuable, so we really appreciate you giving us a whole hour, and thank you so much. So with that, we're going to stay on the line. We invite all the small business organization CEOs to stay with us. We're going to take questions that are coming into the chat box to our small business owners. If you have questions, please start putting them in the chat box. And it's my pleasure to hand the conversation over to my co-executive director, John Stanford, who will facilitate this portion. John, over to you.
Thank you, Rhett.
Thank you, Rhett. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to all the organizations that were able to join us today. Really welcome the opportunity for folks listening on the line, the more than 2,000 small business owners that we have with us today, to submit questions through the chat box and through the question and answer one. We'd really like to be able to address some of the key questions that are on your mind. I will take a little bit of moderator's prerogative, joined here by Katie Bleester-Wannenberg, President for Government Relations at the National Association for Self-Employed, and Leroy Cavazos, the Vice President of Government and International Affairs at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, as well as many of the CEOs of the organizations who have remained on the line. Leroy, Katie, I might start with you two, a question that I certainly am getting from several small business owners, is from your perspective, what are some of the priorities and places where we need to go from here? I know the speaker listened and talked about some of the ideas from there, but from your perspectives, where do you see the next package to benefit small businesses really going?
Leroy, do you want me to go first?
Yes, please go ahead, Katie.
Well, thanks everyone for being on the call today, and it was wonderful to hear from the speaker directly. I think it's acknowledged that we have such a strong advocate in her and the rest of the many members of Congress who have taken the extreme step in acknowledging the role and responsibility of small businesses in our economy, and especially during this incredibly challenging time where we are seeing that pressure and that stress really applied to our small businesses. I think from the perspective of the National Association for the Self-Employed, where we go next, and I think that was shared by many of our organizations and business owners that spoke on the phone today, is what is the long-term plan for supporting the self-employed, the micro business owners, and the small business owners that are in the middle, are in the eye of the storm. They haven't weathered the storm. They are not through the storm. They're still living this every day. And I know there were quite a few proposals related to PPP that were discussed, but I think going forward, what is that long-term plan to support our small businesses and their employees? I think one thing, interestingly enough, that was not discussed, and I know certainly Small Business Roundtable will be sharing their policy ideas with the Speaker and the Senate, is how are we looking at two issues? I think healthcare being one, given that we're in the middle of a global pandemic that is health related. I think it has seriously exacerbated and shown the dramatic holes that we have in our healthcare system. And so what do we need to do about that? I believe, Ann Zimmerman brought up the issue of prescription drugs. I'd like for us to have a bigger conversation about access and affordability. And primarily for the self-employed, securing a healthcare package that is robust and affordable is a significant challenge. So I think that's one area where we could put forth some solutions. And then I think the second issue is equity within the tax code. You know, I think that while we had the tax bill in 2017, you know, there's still quite a bit of work to be done to support our self-employed micro business owners and small business owners to have a more equitable tax code. And I think there could be real bipartisan support in ensuring that that equity comes through. And just simple things, even things that exist even with PPP, the self-employed are unable to use the 75% of their loan to cover their health insurance benefits while other small businesses can. And so those inequities still exist in our tax code. And I certainly hope we can come together and build towards a better healthcare system and a better tax system that serves our community in a much more thoughtful and forward-looking way. Leroy?
Yes, well, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you to all our partners at Small Business Roundtable. It's an honor to partner, and what a great interaction we were blessed to have with Speaker Pelosi as we continue to advocate on behalf of the 30 million small businesses in America. For the USHCC, we represent 4.7 million of those 30 million small businesses who combined represent an economic impact of $800 billion to our US economy. And I think that right now our 4 top priorities as we continue to advocate is making sure that there is more lending to CDFIs and minority depository institutions so that this money from the federal government gets into the hands of our small business owners out in local communities these are the grassroots lenders, the smaller regional banks who actually have these relationships. Also, we're advocating for more transparent reporting on SBA's PPP and disaster relief programs. If we are able to get this data, and if this data is shared with the small business community across our country, us as technical assistants, advocacy, and resource leaders in this space, we can work with banks and with the federal government to guide this funding into the right hands. So it's so critical that that piece is also highlighted. And then of course, the part that really changes the trajectory of small business, ladies and gentlemen, is making sure that we integrate small business enterprises as strategic vendors and part of the US supply chain, whether it be as federal procurement or as procurement for Fortune 500 companies in this country. We stand committed under the leadership of our board of directors and our small but mighty team to continue pledging forward on the path to make sure that minority businesses have a seat at the procurement tables of this country. So with that, John, I'll turn it back over to you and field any questions from the more than 2,000 participants that we have on the call.
Thanks, Leroy and Katie. I'll give some of the other CEOs an opportunity to jump in on that question. One of the questions we're getting a few things around is this idea of reentry. Many states are talking about or considering reopening. To any of the folks, the CEOs and leaders on the line, what kind of thoughts need to be considered when reopening, and how does reopening in the small business community tie in together?
Well, this is John Arnsmeyer. I think, you know, obviously it's got to be done carefully, and you know, data continues to be important. And unfortunately, the reality is we don't have the testing that we'd like to have out there. But I think we've got to balance off. I mean, reopening will actually, you know, obviously create revenue in and of itself, but we need to increase confidence. So it's got to be done right. I mean, if there's a lot of reopening and all of a sudden, then you know the infection and death numbers go way up, that's going to reduce confidence. So but I do think that it's a combination of actual money coming in and then building confidence in the economy. And I think we've got to sort of think of it that way.
I think, John, to follow up on that question, I think the challenge really becomes, and Leroy and I had an opportunity to be in the webinar yesterday with the Next Gen Chamber of Commerce, and I know Arm's on the call, but one of the things that came up about reopening that I think is really powerful for the small business community is to talk about reinvention. By our ethos is about being entrepreneurs and innovating. And so I think as we're looking at reopening, especially dependent on your business, is really how can you look at innovating and creating new ways to engage with your consumers. If it's through your local coffee shop, if it's your bookshop, really thinking about how could you do this different and how could you ensure business continuity. And so I think that's kind of a charge that I think this community should really be thinking about is how do we reinvent ourselves yet again in light of this pandemic situation. And so I challenge all of us to really think about that. And I think also the collaboration amongst business owners is really key. I think organizations like SBR, Next Gen Chamber of Commerce, all of the membership associations represented on this call all provide a way in which you can dialogue and interact with your fellow business owners so that you can bounce ideas off of each other and really learn lessons. As we see, California take some steps on Friday to reopen up, where are those shared learnings that can be disseminated across the country so that business owners can learn from each other and open up safely.
Katie, this is Ann. If I can jump in on that, I think it's really important too that we stay together as a group and certainly interact with all of us to make sure that some of these changes to the existing law get made, because these small businesses aren't going to be able to come out on the other end under a lot of debt. So yes, they've taken the PPP or the EIDL or whatever, but we need to get some of these extended periods and all the things we've talked about so that they come out and can start fresh. We got to stay on it.
And to that point, I will say, Katie, that we're also heavily advocating to make sure that the small business development centers, the minority development centers, and the women business development centers across the country have the adequate funding and technical assistance resources to help businesses get back on track as states begin to reopen in a safe manner. So that's also an important part of our advocacy as a collective group at Small Business Roundtable, is to make sure that we have the technical assistance providers well armed and locked and loaded in order to be there as a pathway and guide for our small business owners to have the necessary tools that they're going to need to get back to work.
I know Ron Busby from the U.S. Black Chambers wanted to jump in. Ron?
No, I was just going to say, for many of us, our businesses, it is an opportunity for us to take these couple of weeks or months to really think about the future of our industries, what they're going to look like, what we need to be training ourselves on now to prepare ourselves for the future. And understand this is not the last pandemic scare. We have to think about the businesses that we're in and the future of those industries. We're doing a series across the country, webinar series on the future of the 6 industries that we think are important to our communities. That's the industries including restaurants, hair salons and services of luxury, retail, what's the future of retail, restaurants, what the future of those restaurants, as well as hospitality. We have to take these 2 to 4 weeks and really think about what we can do to prepare ourselves for a security scam on our computers that we keep so much of our data on. We got to think about things that we never thought about before to get us to this next opportunities that are going to come. We also need to be thinking about mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of businesses that are going to be going out of business. We need to be thinking about partnering with those firms to keep them in business, or acquiring those customers that they had to be able to grow our firms. So acquisitions, and especially now, is a time for us to be thinking about where is there going to be property that's available, where are there going to be businesses as well as opportunities.
Thanks, Ron. And Keith, there were a few questions in there, but would love to get sort of more of the perspective from the self-employed. Also, as some folks on the phone know, Keith has a deep accounting background, and I think you and he can understand some of these elements more than any of us. Keith, do you want to weigh in on some of the questions?
Yeah, John, thanks so much. And again, thanks for holding this together. But to kind of touch on what Rod mentioned, there's opportunities here. And I guess it's the old adage of, the silver lining to the cloud. But what we have learned over the last 30 days, 45 days is there are more individuals out there looking for opportunities to start a new business. We like the concept, as Madam Speaker talked about, the dream of owning your own business, but many of the new businesses we see today wasn't necessarily their dream, but they found out that they were unemployed and now they're basically self-employed, not necessarily by desire. They're doing their own thing. It's a new gig economy. Maybe they're doing the same services they've done for someone else, but on their own. So I think it's a unique opportunity for a lot of individuals to start their own business. So, I think it's important to remember that the first job that any new business creates is the job of the owner. That is the number one job that they created from the beginning. So recognizing it as an opportunity, I think is always critical. As Ron mentioned, I think being creative, being intuitive, being open to particular opportunities, I think that is critical. But there's so many opportunities today, and I think being aware of financial support through PPP, from support through all the organizations that are represented here, all the websites that we all share amongst one another provides information, support, resources. So never lose track. Any of the people who are still on the call here, never lose track of the fact that you're not alone. There are resources available to help you get up and going, whether that's government assistance, financial assistance, or just answering your next question. Look through the detail on this call. The resources available to you are immense. So never give up, never surrender. And I think that's the most critical thing we can think of today.
Keith, I think those really positive, that outlook, as well as your point around resources, they really are out there. All the organizations, I've been saying there's never been a more important time to be a member of a chamber, to have colleagues and peers who you can rely on. I want to pivot. I saw having a couple questions that have come in around millennials and young entrepreneurs who are either relatively recently out of school or left straight into the entrepreneurship field. Some interesting new data out today showed that young entrepreneurs are possibly the most at risk for this. Aram, over at the Next Gen Chamber of Commerce, any thoughts that you have for millennial entrepreneurs?
Thank you. Great presentations today, and it's just a pleasure to be a part of this larger discussion. I also saw some of that data, and it's disheartening, but it's also an opportunity, I think, for especially millennials and Zoomers, who, especially with Zoomers who are on the younger end of that spectrum, that maybe don't follow as much of the public policy conversations that are taking place, to really take the opportunity to find ways like these forums to further engage themselves so they can be informed as to how they can become more resilient, especially as we're looking at rebuilding. And for a lot of them that have gone through, I guess, 2 economic downturns, right, in the early 2000s, in 2008, 2009, and now this, to really look to leadership as well as in their own communities to find ways of maintaining that resilience and adapting. We had a great conversation with folks like Leroy and Katie, who are on the roundtable today, about reinventing yourselves. And I think now more than ever, the power of the internet and the power of social and digital media is really the driving force to moving a lot of these business leaders forward. So I think, my suggestion is, let's continue to look at the great data that's being published. Let's continue to look at opportunities to work with, especially in the tech sector, organizations like Facebook, who are making their grant programs and really want to target a lot of millennials and Zoomers in helping them rebuild. I think we need to just be vigilant and to ask for more, and to be able to stand up and speak our minds across social media platforms, which we all know legislators and the like pay particular attention to. So all of these conversations are, I think, just a starting point, and I'm looking forward to having more of these discussions in the coming months to further discuss it. So thank you.
Thanks, Aram. One of our few final questions are asking around what might be next or expected out of Congress. A couple ideas that people have asked a few questions about. An idea for liability protection for business owners in terms of liabilities they may face with employees. Karen Kerrigan over at the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, I thought I might have you weigh in, whether it's the idea of liability protections, whether it's some of this conversation around a recovery fund or simply a payroll tax change. What ideas are you hearing and do you see really having traction moving forward? Do we have Karen? I think we may have lost Karen, so I'll open that up, and I think this will be kind of an opportunity for folks to close. Ramiro, Leroy, Ron, others, John.
Sure. Well, Rhett, this is Ramiro. I just want to say that I deeply appreciate our partnership with every one of our small business leaders today. Each of the organizations that you represent are important to the new economy, and I agree with what's been said earlier by some of you. This crisis is an opportunity for us to come out stronger and to be vigilant and to be more battle tested. And if anybody knows the stresses and strains of representing our members, it's the group on this call. So I thought it was an excellent call, Rhett, and thank you and John and for your leadership and for including us. We're here to help, and thank you, Leroy, for working with us to keep us connected to everyone, and to each of you. We're very excited to be your partner.
This is Ron Busby from the U.S. Black Chamber. I just wanted to echo what Ramiro has stated. I just wanted to add in that I think it is really important for the folk that are on the call to adhere to what we're asking. First off is data. And so we're going to need that data both from Small Business Administration as well as for you guys that are there on the ground. So we are here in Washington, D.C. advocating on behalf of our members, but we really need to get the data from you guys that are there on the Main Street as it's been discussed. So as that information flows up, understand that our voices is as loud as you guys allow us to be. So when things are being done here, understand the impact that it's having on your local communities. And I'll end with a statement that I always say, and that is, we want a great America, but in order for there to be a great America, there's got to be a great minority America. And in order for there to be a great minority America, we need great minority chambers. So you guys join our chambers. You can find out more information about the U.S. Black Chamber at usblackchambers.org. We got a lot of resources. We do weekly calls. We do weekly webinars. Prepare for the future, but let's make sure that we're arming ourselves to have a good fight through the rest of this legislation and get through this COVID virus together. Thanks.
And this is John Arnsmeyer. Again, I want to thank everybody, all the my fellow colleagues and participants here. And we too are very focused on providing resources and information to small businesses across the country. Go to our website, smallbusinessmajority.org, or to our resource website, venturize.org. We're doing multiple webinars a day, and we're getting information out. So please, if you know, we don't have all the answers, but please avail yourself of what we've got and join some of our webinars and contact us, and we're here to help.
This is Ann Zimmerman, and I'd like to echo what John said. I actually work with him some on his small business council, and I know he does a great job. Also, businessesfortaxreform.org is another site you can go to if you want to be heard. Either of the groups, a lot of these groups can help you with that. Stay tough and remember what Nancy Pelosi said. She said, know your power. That's the most important thing I think that was small business owners.
Any other closing thoughts from our CEOs? I know we still have another 1,200 people on the line, but we will close it out and be respectful of everyone's time. Any other closing thoughts from folks on the line?
Hey, John, it's Justin Nelson with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I just want to thank you and Rhett for putting this together. Really do appreciate it and bringing such a diverse group of voices together. I think it's really important that we stick together as a small business community here. I think the speaker was spot on, and I'll underscore what Ron said. It's so important that we use the voices that we have, and that means the small businesses that are on this call, their networks. When we reach out, please respond, please weigh in, please let your members know what needs to happen to be a part of these legislative efforts. It really does move the needle. As a recovering former Hill staffer, I know that to be the fact. So I will just underscore that.
And this is Jill Houghton with Disability In, and I would just echo everyone's comments and say thank you for the opportunity to conduct this important roundtable. Thank you for all of your advocacy and work and the opportunity to work together. And you know, please, to Justin's point, know your power and use your voice, and use it loud and use it often.
Thanks, Bill. I can't imagine much better closing comments than that. So I'll say thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you especially to Madam Speaker Pelosi, her incredible team for the opportunity to have an open dialogue about what kind of resources are available for small business community. You can reach us at Small Business Roundtable, at team@smallbusinessroundtable.org. You can find these resources, this recording, and others at smallbusinessroundtable.org. I want to thank my co-executive director, Rhett Buttle, as well as our incredible team, Ashlyn Roberts, Colin Danley, Chris Landrigan, for pulling together. But mostly, thank you to the nearly 3,000 small businesses that joined us today for this great conversation. I hope everyone has a great week and continues to stay active advocates for the important entrepreneurship and small business communities. Thank you.